Hey YouTube, Meef here. Welcome to episode 42 of my FTB Continuum quick tips and tricks. Today I wanted to go over a little bit of what it's going to take to automate some of the basic components for the ME network and applied energistics in general. And I think by doing this, it's going to make things a little bit more fun. It kind of increases your ability to automate a little bit further. So let's start with the basics. I think the setup here, and let's take a look. Processors are needed for just about every component in applied energistics. You can see calculation, engineering, logic processor. Let's take a look. But all this stuff is done in an inscriber. So the inscriber stuff is relatively simple. We'll take a look at that in a bit here, but let's cover these basic components. So we've got, like, say, the printed logic circuits, and then printed silicone and stuff like that. What I've got going here, since this is all done here, I've got this set up so that it's pretty much it takes care of itself, really. What I've got here is we're looking at a ME interface hooked into item storage. On top of that is sitting a copper chest with an import bus. So stuff goes into the item storage. All these crafters have a separate recipe. They craft whatever goes in, and it craps it right back out, goes into the copper chest, into the ME import bus, and ends up back in the network. So this works relatively well, as you can see here. So we've got our Pure Certus Quartz Crystals, a little bit of gold, diamonds. And this little bit on the end here is actually making the printed silicone, but I took it one step further and automated this so that silicone is actually being made here too with sand. So we can kind of demo this a little bit. Let's take a look here. Let's just go with a printed engineering circuit. Let's see if we can let's try 5 of these guys and see what it comes up with. So 5 diamonds are on the network. We're going to craft 5, so let's start it. And as you can see, the ME interface actually pushed that stuff out. And you can see here, as this thing is going, it's just doing its business, and then the servos pull it back out. These 2 lower slots, depending on the side, these will fill up. What I did is I put these on the top so it pulls out right out of the top. That way I don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It shouldn't really overfill. If you notice that you're getting stuff ending up down here and you're going to run a setup like this, go ahead and put some different servos on there, and that'll push that stuff back into the network. So there's our 5 new printed engineering circuits. So the setup works pretty much the same for all of these. Pretty much shit goes in, shit comes out. The way I did this with the ME interface, these are all different crafting recipes, so you can see here. The printed engineering circuit ends up being, it's just 1 diamond. The silicone itself is just sand being pumped in there, and then it gets run through the crafter and then shit back out. So really not that difficult. If you watch the previous episode, you can kind of see what I've got going here. The recipes for these guys are actually done in the pattern terminal, but it's done with this interface. So this is the crafting pattern. This is the actual processing pattern. As you can see here, I've actually got this set up for the last stage or tier power cell. You tell it what you want to put in here. So for instance, it was 1 diamond creates the printed engineering circuit. So this stuff works pretty well. It's not the fastest thing in the world yet. I think later on I'll probably improve this a little bit. For right now, this actually, it works well. You just got to kind of be on top. There are better ways to do this with emitters from applied energistics, but right now I prefer a little bit more control over what I've got going in here. So, but anyway, that's the printed circuit setup. It's just done with crafters, and I'm pulling it out the top with item ducts and servos, and then back into the network with an import bus. You might be wondering why I didn't just stuff a whole bunch of import buses on the top of this, and it all has to do with channels. So right now I've only got the 1 ME controller, and I'm kind of I don't want to say pushing it to the limit yet because I've got another side I can use, but you can see here this is starting to turn into a little bit of a spaghetti pile. So the management of this stuff, it really takes a little bit of trial and error to get this stuff right. As you can see here, I've got molecular assemblers and then ME interfaces for standard crafting there, and my crafting CPUs are actually going to be on this side. There is some secondary stuff here we're going to go over. So this is the automated setup for the charger. This is going to get you charged Certus Quartz. This is pretty much just an ME interface, and this pattern here is pretty much just a regular Certus Quartz crystal gets pumped in there. Once it's actually changed over, I've got this set and filtered for a charged Certus Quartz crystal with a whitelist. So once it's done, it pulls it back out, and this goes into this chest, which is just stuck together with an import bus. So the inscriber setup is a little bit different. So the faces on here, the sides actually correspond to this interface. So whatever you put it in, the top is going in this slot, left side is this, and then bottom is actually going to be in this slot. All this output is actually going out the right side in this setup. So the way this one works, got this set up with another ME interface, and here's the recipes for the actual processors themselves. So what it does is it just sends a printed silicone, printed engineering circuit, and then the redstone, and it pretty much just puts them in the chest. Servos take care of the rest with the filtering stuff. There is better ways to do this, and it's much faster to actually use like impulse item ducts, or just, you know, put the export buses on the side here, then use level emitters. I just wanted a little bit more control over what I've actually got running here, so this is the way this is set up. It works relatively well. We can actually, I'll show you here. We'll get it into doing some work. Let's pull these engineering processors out of here, and then let's just craft 5 because I think I've got the material. So you can see here, this is what's going in, and to craft, this is what's coming out. So let's start that. And you can see that the item duct here is kind of what is slowing me down, but it just pumps it in there and then shits it out the other side. Goes in there and goes back into the network. So this setup works pretty well. It's pretty basic, and like I said, it's on the slow side. There's ways to speed this up. Probably do that in a later episode. So that's the inscriber. One other thing I wanted to go over, since it's part of the really basic set of stuff here, is Pure Certus Quartz Crystals. If you haven't made this crystal growth chamber, do so. It makes things way easier. So what I've got set up here is an export bus and then an import bus. This is filtered, so it's only pulling out Pure Certus Quartz Crystals. The export bus is dumping in Certus Quartz seeds. Now the reason I did that is because this is not something I really want to keep in the network at all times. So I've kind of got it set up a little bit differently upstairs. Let's go take a look. The reason I kind of went that route is I didn't really want to mess around with it. I didn't want a whole bunch of those Certus Quartz seeds sitting around on the network, just because my storage was a little bit low, so I went with export bus rather than an ME interface. So there's a couple things when we take a look at, say, Pure Certus Quartz Crystals. The way I've got this set up is that whole process is triggered by setting up Certus Quartz seeds. So in order to do that, I've got this set up as an actual craft, and that's going to be going through one of the ME interfaces with the crafting recipe itself. We can take a look at that. It's actually here. So it's set up with 1 sand and a Certus Quartz dust, and you can see that here. So this is just a regular standard crafting recipe done through the molecular assemblers. Once these actually hit the network, they'll just get dumped into the growth accelerator chamber. Now I've got a recipe set up here for Certus Quartz dust, and this is just dumping in, say, for that particular recipe. Let's say I'm out of Certus Quartz dust, which I'm not. I've actually got a bunch here, But what I can do is if I want to craft this, let's say I did 10 of these bad boys. If I need to craft it, since that recipe is already part of this, it'll just take it. It'll input that stuff, or it'll try and craft it first. So if this is needed, it's going to grind up a bunch of Certus quartz through this ME interface and then pump it into the grinder. And then this just comes back out and goes back into the network, and it continues with the craft. So pretty simple. The one thing I really didn't figure out with this thing yet, and I'm going to do a little bit of tinkering with it, just know that if you're going to do a whole bunch of these crystals, Pure Certus Quartz Crystals, it kind of fills things up a little bit goofy. Let's take a look. Let's craft 64 of these. So we're using 32 sand, 32 Certus Quartz dust to make 64 of those. Let's start it, and we can see this thing powered up, and that export bus is just pumping these things in here. I've got 3 accelerator cards, so this goes pretty quick. Once they're ready to go, they just come out. With these out, it did kind of fill up relatively fast. I guess it's not a big deal. It depends on how you set it up. So, but that's some of the basics here. If you haven't got started on the recipes for some of the stuff like annihilation and formation cores, get that stuff in there. I'll take a look at some of the basic stuff that I've got set up in this network already, just so that it's a little bit more informative. The cool thing about this interface terminal is that you can see what ME interfaces are actually hooked to stuff. So downstairs I've got that one hooked to the charger, and it shows up as charger, and then you can actually manipulate the patterns remotely. So if there was something else I really wanted to put on that charger, I could put it in here and it would just do its thing. So depending on whatever you've got set for the recipe. So this looks a little bit convoluted because I actually just moved all those ME interfaces with the molecular assemblers hooked into them. So things are a little bit disorganized here, but you can see that I've got 9 of those set up downstairs. And this is kind of the stuff I've got going. One of the big ones I wanted to take care of right away is the ME interface itself, and then molecular assemblers. So these are pretty much just crafting patterns. Get those set up. And of course get your blank patterns ready to go so you can auto craft those, so you don't have to do that every time. Once I had those set, it was making basic storage cells. I actually got some of the liquid stuff set up here too, but these are relatively simple to make. Then you can see I kind of went all the way towards the end of this, the full tier stuff. So you gotta be a little bit careful about some of the substitution stuff depending on what you're using. Some of this stuff I think I allowed some substitutions, and the iron casing was one. I think it had to do with the sticks I was using. To be on the safe side, just I guess shut the substitutions off. You'll have better luck. I've noticed that some of the crafting stuff gets a little bit clogged up if you don't really pay attention to what you're substituting. So there's a little bit of I want to say an issue with some of this stuff, crafting this the way it is. You're going to notice that if you've only got one processor dedicated to doing this stuff, especially on stuff like these printed circuits, you're going to notice that it clogs up your crafter, or your CPUs that do the crafting. In order to get by that, you probably want to have 2. I'm working on 3 right now that I kind of got this stuff set up. But in order to actually be efficient at this, you need a few of them. So I'm looking at doing some more. This setup is relatively simple. If we didn't go over this before, I don't recall. So we'll go over it quick. What I've got set here is crafting co-processors and then some crafting storage. So you'll notice the bytes and stuff that show up when you request a craft recipe. It's got to fall within the guidelines of this. So 16K is enough to get you where you need to be for right now. Even this these 4Ks with this 1K on here, in a crafting co-processing unit. This was more than enough to get everything over here built. It gets a little goofy when you get to the high tier power cells because I've got to use that one, but you set it to automatic and let it go. You're going to see that there's a crafting monitor here. And the way I set this up, it's kind of cool. Let's take a look at, let's try a power cell. I wonder if I got the stuff to make this. Oh, it looks like I do. If you kind of pay attention up there, you can see it went really fast, but it shows what's actually being crafted there. So if you've got some way to display this, it's kind of cool to see what's going on, especially if you're crafting stuff all over the place. So one thing to go over real quickly here is channel management. I kind of talked about the spaghetti in some previous episodes, but do yourself a favor, make smart cables. If you can get away from regular Fluix, like the glass, do it. Eventually I'd like to replace all this stuff with smart cables just so I can see the channels, but you really got to pay attention. Just because you can see here like 9 out of 32 channels for my molecular assembler setup, and this stuff over here was 10 out of 32, so that's all this stuff. The green is just the crafting CPUs, and you can see that's pretty low usage right now, 2 out of 32. But where things really got hairy was over towards the main part of my work area, so 23 out of 32 channels. So this is running back. You can see where this gets a little bit complicated. So we've got multiple junctions, but 21 out of 32 channels. You can see that there's 2 channels here for a total of 23. So this is running all the way back, but the cables kind of show you what's hooked up to it. What you want to do is create main trunks for yourself so you can kind of test this out, because you're only given 32 channels per side. So there's a little bit of work that you have to put into doing this. So I'll kind of keep that in mind. I think that's about it for some of the basic setup stuff. We'll go over some more automation stuff. I think the next episode I want to do is going to be automating the reactor. I've kind of increased that a little bit since I've got enough plutonium, but you can see that I've kind of increased my power storage capacity here. So next episode we'll go over that. We'll take a look at what it takes to make that go. And then we'll do a little bit more of the complicated stuff. Alright, until next time.